Hello my dear friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Barbara and today we're going to be going over the metaphysics of death. So very excited to be getting into this video. It is going to be a metaphysical perspective on death. So anything that does come through is based off of my own theories, ideas, perspectives even. So you guys can take what resonates and leave behind what does not. Also, if this is a triggering topic for you, best to click off now. Also, if you're struggling with suicidal ideation, definitely type it into Google and I'm sure the phone number closest to you in your country is going to pop up for help. Also, maybe not watch this video as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. It's really interesting because the other night, as I'm in like a half asleep, half awake state, basically what was coming through was, I don't know if you guys have seen those videos that have been going around for the past little while now of like the little sheeps or animals or whatever they are going in circles. And it's really interesting because honestly, while I was sleeping, this is what I was thinking about. So I guess I'm just always thinking and never resting. But anyways, what's really interesting is because that image popped into my mind, basically I started thinking about this, and I have made a video on this a few years ago, but honestly, Lord knows where that is. So what's really interesting with all of this is that this is one of the collective wounds, one of the collective fears, one of the collective triggers. As soon as you trigger this within an individual, I mean, essentially we've seen what has happened in these past few years. You can control people, okay, because it is a collective wound and it's a wound that has been passed down through the ages. But honestly, like, there really is no need for this fear because I find this to be something more so that pertains to the West, because people in the East usually do celebrate when someone does cross out of this earth plane. And I will be using that term for this entire video just because, again, you don't know what the algorithms these days, what words are triggers if you use it too much. So in these countries, when someone crosses out of the earth plane, they do a celebration of life. They basically finished this part of their journey and now they're moving on to the next part of their journey, which is essentially your soul continues, your soul goes on, is really what that is. A lot of people probably believe, and I think maybe this is where the fear comes from, that this is the only life, that this is all that exists. And it's like, once it's done, and there's always grief, right? From young, when you watch movies and all these sorts of things, it's like there's always some sort of theme of this, which I'm sure is deliberately put in there, but that's a different conversation for a different day. So there's always a theme of this where someone crosses out of the earth plane and everyone's sad and it's really upsetting, and there's always like the somber vibe and just like the music's sad and all these sorts of things. So basically, from young, you're going to be trained to think that this is a sad thing. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that it's not a sad thing. Obviously, a loss is a loss and you're still going to go through the stages of grief. But it's like, when we really think about it, what's the difference between, let's say, a breakup with someone and this happening? It's like when this takes place in someone's life, it seems to be this whole thing and it seems to basically make that person's world come crashing down. Again, it really does depend on the individual's perspectives. But I am making this video. Being Scorpio dominant, at the end of the day, these are all topics that I do contemplate and dwell on. So it's kind of like, if we do have a different perspective on this, it's like, yes, you're going to go through that process of grieving and all those sorts of things. And the same thing within your life, you know, sometimes you do lose an individual in the physical reality where it's like they're not in your life anymore, and it is a challenge as well. So it's kind of like, why is there such a huge reaction, okay, when these sorts of things take place? And again, it is our belief system surrounding this. It is, I guess, the ultimate definite end, it seems like, at least. But when it comes to the metaphysical perspective, it's not, okay? And sometimes, actually, I heard even from my shaman a few years ago, he basically says that when this does take place, when you do cross out, you are then awoken, you then actually awake out of this dream, essentially, is the idea there, okay? So I'm just gonna slip that in there. So that's kind of what's going on with this. And you know what's so funny? There's actually a saying, I don't know now if it's in English or maybe it's something that we say in my culture, so I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe they have this like story in English as well, this like metaphor, story, whatever it is. I'm going to be paraphrasing because honestly, I don't remember it word for word, but the idea was there was this individual who basically wanted to, I don't know now if he wanted to be like the best in the world or win something. It's something like this, like something along those lines, and he was not able to basically conquer sleep. The whole thing was like he couldn't stay awake. Every time he would end up falling asleep, and the whole thing here was, you can't conquer sleep, which in the story was considered to be like a little death. How are you going to conquer the world? So with like this whole idea here, it's kind of like we basically go through this process every night when we go to sleep. We do leave our bodies. Once again, we're conditioned to not remember where we're going, what we're doing. We're also very much conditioned to believe that the physical plane is the only plane that exists, and that is the only plane that's real, and that is the only plane that matters, especially the material things. A lot of people have attachments to these sorts of things, but it's like, it's an inversion if you really do think about it. If you look at my other videos in my metaphysical playlist about how to clear karma and even astrology and all these sorts of things, basically what a lot of this comes down to is the circle of karma and basically being stuck in that loop. the karmic loop, and this relates to those sheep or animals that I was talking about earlier in the video that basically came through in my sleep, okay, in my dream state, how they're going in constant circles. And basically what I was seeing at the time was that humanity is in this constant loop, which is the karmic loop. Now the karmic loop is the fact that we are basically stuck in a reincarnation trap, in a reincarnation loop, feeling like you have to constantly come back down here, come back down to this earth plane. And personally, my own theories, even prior to this year, like in the past, my theories were always kind of like, for people who have this huge fear of this, sometimes back then at least, I felt like the fear was, the soul didn't really get to live all of its full desires on this earth plane. So that's why you're fearing this, that's why you're fearing crossing out, because it's like you didn't get to fulfill whatever you wanted to do on a soul level. But now what I'm starting to think is maybe the fear comes from the reincarnation loop and feeling like you're going to have to come back down, and basically just not understanding this, not understanding how to get out of this whole basically structure that we have all been placed under. Now, what's really interesting is as this whole theory evolves and these stories evolve and more of us starts discussing this and communicating about this, I did hear other individuals talk about basically like two things actually I've heard. One thing I heard from an individual, and they were basically saying that like we aren't prepared to cross out. We don't know how to cross out. We don't know how to get out of this whole, loop is really what that is, for lack of a better term. And for this reason, it's kind of like you get siphoned back to come down here. So now I know that's going to bring the question up, and the question being, how do you actually get out of this loop, get out of the reincarnation loop? And my own research, at least, or findings are that you're going to have to heal, integrate the lower chakra wounds, the desires that you have, karmic dynamics that you have with people, but not get trapped in that. So it's kind of like, you don't want to get trapped in thinking that, oh my gosh, I have a karmic debt with this person and now I'm going to have to come back. Sometimes it's kind of like being like, I don't claim that energy. That's something that I've been doing, at least. Sometimes people want to put things on you and you have to be like, I don't claim this, because words are spells. So let's say someone says something to you and it's like they're trying to get a reaction out of you, or they're trying to bind you. That's really what it is. Definitely check out my videos in this playlist, the Metaphysical playlist, on energy siphoning, energy binding on the earth plane, to understand a little bit more about that. But people do this unconsciously almost, but I don't even think it's so much unconsciously. I think it splits within people and dark entities coming through them. But again, different video for a different day. I have touched on all these topics here and there in the Metaphysical playlist if you guys want to learn more about that. You're also going to be the narcissism on the earth plane, just to understand how these splits work within people. And for you guys to understand when this takes place, it's going to be kind of like a kick in your solar plexus, like someone's taking your power away from you. So it's going to be anytime anyone puts anything on you, tries to manipulate you, take your power away from you in any way, shape, or form. When I say put something on you, it's like they kind of make you feel like, let's say you owe them something. This is really what I mean. Things like, it shouldn't be things like this. Like maybe something like you feel like you need to go visit, I don't know, a family member for whatever reason, and they like guilt you into this. They're like tying you energetically to them. You have to cut the cord with that. So there isn't really a lingering energy. Personally, what I've been doing with individuals is I've actually been verbally saying that. Anytime someone says something that I don't like, or I do feel like it's coming from that like nefarious spell energy, again, it's unconscious. I don't think people do this maliciously. It's just their own wounding and traumas where it kind of comes at you energetically, where they try to tie you to them. What I say to them is, I don't claim that. Like I verbally say it, like I say it out loud. It's kind of like a counter spell if you really think about it. I hope some of you guys are following what I'm saying. If you guys maybe aren't in this area where you can say this, you can think it, that's just as powerful, or you can even write it down, or you can just do cord cutting meditations, all these sorts of things where you are basically releasing the energy of anything that anyone has placed upon you. But again, as time goes on, you guys are going to be able to catch it. So that's one thing in terms of people trying to loop you to them. They're basically trying to cord you to them. Now, this can happen on a grand scale as well. So that can also happen with individuals when they're siphoning off of your energy. You're going to know when you kind of are worshiping someone, you think someone knows more than you think someone, is ahead of you in one way, shape, or form. You're putting people on a pedestal. They're courting you to them, especially if they're doing this on purpose. So that's another way that your energy gets courted to another person. And then it's interesting, like in those situations, it might not affect you as much, but in these situations where it's like day-to-day interactions with actual people in your physical reality, saying things to you and all these sorts of things, again, it's like you're gonna feel it in your body. I can't really explain it any other way. And most of the time it's gonna be in that solar plexus area. It's like a kick, it's like they're trying to take your power away from you, whether again they're aware of it or not. So in a situation you want to do cord cutting. What I've heard from other individuals as well is like when you're trying to cross out of the earth plane, and when I say plane, it's a dimension, okay? We are in a dimension and we're all stuck in that basically cycle is really what it is for these reasons, because we're not taught basically how to leave. That was like the most amazing thing that I've actually heard from someone say. They basically were saying that throughout your life you should be learning how to cross out when it is your time, obviously. Now with that being said, another thing that I do also want to mention in this video is going to be a trigger warning. I'm going to talk about basically what I mentioned at the beginning of the video for people who struggle with that ideation. I can't say that word once again. But the thing is, if you ever fall into the energy where it's like you basically want to cross out at your own hand, okay, I hope you guys are following. If you're in this situation, you guys have to understand that this is going to be dark forces, dark energies that are basically guiding you in this direction, because really what's important to understand, and it's really interesting, you actually have this theory in a lot of religious scriptures, but again, these things have been, what's the word, like broken telephone over time. But if you look at the origins of it all, if you basically do that, you are cutting your karma short and you come right back in. That's the thing. You come right back in once again. You have to do the whole journey over again. And yes, it is a challenge this entire life. I mean, like, it's not for the faint of heart. There's going to be a lot of karmic clearance that all of us really have to do and clear, but these are the important things to understand. So something that I heard from another individual is kind of like when you are crossing out, okay, so whenever that happens naturally in its time, okay, I'm going to say that. So when it happens naturally in its time, when you're crossing out, it's important not to get guilted back into coming back in, because in that situation there could be maybe entities or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, when you are in that state, basically being like, oh, you didn't get to complete that thing, or you didn't get to say sorry to that person, like cords you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you have to be stronger to get out of the basically the earth plane without actually having those attachments. And throughout your life, now I'm adding to that, throughout your life you can make this easier for yourself by releasing all these lower chakra wounds, guilt, shame, forgiveness is going to be a big one, like these types of things where it's like, again, it's kind of like it's courting you. You don't want to be courted to people is really what it is. And it's interesting because then you have that in Buddhism where they talk about the art of non-detachment, obviously in a healthy way. You don't want to be walking around like a sociopath, like cold and like not engaging with people, but like at least the way that I see it, my perspective on it is kind of like you want to have a good time while you're down here. You want to enjoy it to the best of your capability, do things that you love. I know everyone says that, but that's really what it is. Like, it really is that. It's all about the heart space, right, at the end of the day. So you want to be doing things that make you happy, that give you joy. And like anytime these people are trying to cord you to them, emotionally manipulate in any way, shape, or form, make you feel guilty, put their shame on you, because shame is actually transferred energetically. It's not something people are inherently born with. Really cutting those cords to basically be like, I don't claim that energy. Like, I don't, that's you. Like, that's your thing. You'll notice this comes up a lot in terms of psychology. They call it projecting, and most things are a projection. They really, really are. Like, it's really interesting to see when you become the observer and you actually start observing people and seeing what they're doing. It's kind of like sometimes I think, and I'm like, is anyone like truly seen for who they actually are? Do you know what I mean? Or are they all just like projected versions? I even think about this in terms of physical form sometimes. Sometimes I think like we all look different to different people based on like their own like belief systems and perceptions. So it's kind of like, what do we really look like? Anyways, I don't want to throw you guys into that loop that's really taking you into the crown chakra. Now, the second thing that I wanted to add as well, because I did say way back, it's been a while now, but the second thing that I wanted to add is I always talk about Ram Dass when it comes to the theme of this, the crossing out of the earth plane. And I always find it really interesting because he found that it was part of his life purpose to help people cross out. So I find this to be really, really interesting. There is a documentary on him if you guys want to learn even more. I can't remember what it was called. There were two that I watched. One was with him only, and the other one was him and Timothy Leary. It might have been him. It's coming through that it was called Becoming Nothing. So I think that that's the one where he talks about how he helps people cross out of the earth plane. But that's the whole thing here. And it's funny how certain things stick with you and like you kind of start putting all the pieces together, because when the other person talked about not knowing how to cross out of the earth plane, it connected me to him. And that's really what it is. So at least where I'm at now, and in terms of the way that I see this, is that one thing we can do is heal the lower chakra wounds and always do things that your heart is calling you to do, is really what it is, because you kind of want to get them out of your system is also what it is. And there's a lot of boxy energy. I always talk about this in a lot of these videos on this earth plane where it's like, oh, you were at the job for 30 years. You can't start anything new now because you've invested so much time into it, or whatever. There's all these like societal reasons where you're too old to start this, or you should have started this sooner. Like, all these excuses is really what that is. And for these reasons, people don't actually end up starting these things. And then you have the desire line, and then unfortunately when you're about to cross out, you come back. Okay, it might not be immediately, because they do say that we do have like a buffer period where we do assess the life and all these sorts of things, but even that is up for debate and it's up for question. Don't believe everything at the end of the day. Just like take these ideas, and it's important to listen to other people and formulate your own thoughts. That's the thing, because we wouldn't be in the situation that we are currently in as a collective productive if people didn't constantly put other people on a pedestal. And I don't think anyone belongs to be on a pedestal. It's funny, I had the belief since I was young. Anyways, so it's kind of like take these ideas and think about them and be like, okay, does that make sense? Okay, does that resonate with me? Okay, what can I do in this particular situation? Because another thing that's coming through to tell you guys as well is that I believe it's in Catholicism. I think they have something called the 7 sacraments, and I think the 7th one is when you cross out of the earth plane. The priest comes into the house. Actually, it was one of my colleagues back in the day who told me this when her mom crossed out. The priest came and they had like one of their ceremonies. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but they do something. It's really, really interesting to think about this because for them, they have 7 sacraments, they have communion and so on and so forth. It's interesting if you look at this because it's like through this, you have all of these stages, okay, within your life. And the final stage, even for them, is crossing out. And then I'm not sure what the priest does when he comes. If some of you guys know, you guys can comment below. But that's interesting because again, connecting all the dots, there is always a theme in this in all of these religions. But the idea is there, at least the way that I see it. The priest comes, I think, for the person to like say the sins or something. There's something of that sort. But it's interesting to see because again, from a metaphysical perspective, if we were to look at this, it's kind of like the energy's being cleansed, you know, the person saying whatever they thought their sins were, so they're free. But it's kind of like, it's kind of falling into the same idea if we really think about it, okay, just like in a different way. So I'm sure all of these belief systems have some sort of version of this, and again, it's all about connecting the dots. But overall, the way that I see it metaphysically is this: when we are crossing out, you want to have no desires left, you want to have no karmic attachments to people in the sense that you feel guilty in one way, shape, or form, or you feel bound to them, or you feel like there's unfinished business. There's a lot of different ways that this can manifest if you really think about it. So I think that's why, like, throughout life, the best thing that all of us can do, right, is to, again, I don't claim that energy, I've accepted it for what it is. And again, we have this theme coming up in a lot of these religions as well, where it's like, again, acceptance and all these sorts of things. It does tend to be challenging if you think about it, because it is that energy of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a divine feminine energy. We all have these energies within us. We have masculine and feminine energy. Unfortunately, most people are within their shadow, so this is where the healing comes in. So you can go into the divine version of all of these energies within us and try to come as close to an equilibrium as possible. I mean, all people are going to be more dominant in one of the energies, but this is kind of the idea here overall with this. If you have this fear, there is a fear happening that you maybe didn't get to complete something that you wanted. But like I said, more recently, I've been starting to think that the fear is closely connected to having to come back and being tied to this earth plane. So we really have to sit down and figure out ways to not be tied to the earth plane. I've given you guys a few suggestions and a few things that I've personally thought about, but you guys can also definitely contemplate on your own and see how we can go about this to basically not incarnate on this plane again. And overall, it is happening. It is happening around us. People are going into the higher vibrations. They are healing. They're clearing all these sorts of things. But it's really important to clear this. This is a huge collective wound that's been passed down through the ages. We have to think about why it's there and how to clear it and how to not let it be used for manipulation. If you guys catch my drift, I'm sure some of you guys are going to catch my drift with what I'm saying with all of that. So with all of that being said, I do think that that's everything I wanted to cover in this video about this from a metaphysical perspective. I do hope you guys enjoyed my video. If you did, please do like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of the day.